Nathanael said to Philip, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said to him, "Come and see." Now, we don't know if this episode takes place in Bethsaida. John just tells us that Jesus had gone to Galilee. Galilee is a region that includes both the towns of Bethsaida and the town of Nazareth. We don't know whether Nathanael was a homie with Andrew, Peter, and Philip, who all came from Bethsaida. But we can certainly tell that Nathanael and Philip, they seem to share an opinion about Nazareth. And the sharing of that opinion tells us that they are friends, and it binds them together. Because why else would Nathanael feel so comfortable denigrating the town of Nazareth? It sounds like a conversation about a rival high school. Apparently, Nazareth was, to them, a no-account town. Nazareth is not mentioned in any ancient inscriptions that have been found, and Nazareth is not mentioned anywhere in the Old Testament. It seems not to have been very important at all. But what is of account is how easily Nathanael insulted it. Perhaps that insult, that tendency to drop a word like that, perhaps that is so familiar to you, it is to me, that you didn't even notice. The action of casting aspersions on another town, a rival town perhaps, that it reinforces the in-group that he and Philip and perhaps others seem to be part of. I invite you to think about the many ways that we form in-groups and reinforce them. We are constantly testing another person's membership in our circle, in our group. We test by seeing if others share our opinions about things, or if we like the same music, or even if we have the same accent. As you may know, the word shibboleth is the beginning, is the first biblical citation of forming an in-group, and it's all about an accent. Who can tell me, somebody, unmute yourself and tell me what shibboleth means today when we talk about a shibboleth. What is a shibboleth?
Isn't it a way of identifying oneself, or at least wasn't it kind of like a password of sorts?
Exactly.
I'm not sure the usage today because I don't use it, but it was a way of identifying oneself as knowing Christ or something.
It's a way of identifying yourself. It's like in politics, we tend to call them dog whistles now, but it's like a password. And the story of the origin of shibboleth goes back to the book of Judges. There had been a conflict between the people of Gilead and the people of Ephraim. And the people of Ephraim the people of Gilead set up a blockade on the Jordan and to stop the Ephraimites. And to find out whether, because they all looked alike, how are you going to know who's an Ephraimite and who's a Gileadite? Well, it turns out that each tribe pronounced the word shibboleth differently. The word shibboleth, by the way, it means the berry of a grain, like a wheat berry or like a grain of rice. That's what the word means or meant then. But it seems that the people from Ephraim couldn't say shibboleth. They said sibboleth instead. And so they would ask them to say the word, and if they couldn't say shibboleth, they killed them. Because we like to know who's in and who is out. But when being in leads you to scorn the people that are out, that's when we start to get into trouble. But it builds up our group. Eric Fromm, the psychologist, had a word for it. It's called collective narcissism. Now, I have experienced that. When I was, and those of you in the listening group have heard this story, I apologize for repeating it. When I was in the first grade on the south side of Chicago, we had a neighborhood school, K through 8. And we all walked to school at the same time. And I developed one of those crushes that little kids get on older kids. I had a crush on an older girl. I never found out her name. She was probably in the 4th grade. I remember how she looked and how she dressed because I admired her so much. She had long black braids that went down to her waist, and she wore pleated skirts and knee socks. And she was confident, and she had good posture. That was all I needed to know about her. I wanted to be like her, and I wanted her to notice me. And one day she did. She said, "I didn't see you walking to school yesterday. Where were you?" And I said, "Oh, my mother kept me home." I thought this would really be impressive. My mother kept me home because I was playing with dolls at Karen Clapman's and I scratched my eyeball. She said, "Oh, I'm failing." And so I thought, I'm going to let me up the ante. Let me raise the level here a little bit. I decided to toss in something that would sound really sophisticated, something that I had picked up from the dining room table with my parents. And I said, "Well, you know, Karen's Jewish." And the girl said, "I'm Jewish." 1st grade. I learned so much. I am so grateful for learning so much in a few seconds at the age of 6. But what I understand today is how quick I was to throw my playmate under the bus just to close a circle that would unite me and that unnamed 4th grader. In a much more benign way, I experienced the same thing with some of you last Sunday. Certainly, what we experienced was less malignant than bigotry. And I don't ask you to feel guilty about this, but to feel regret about the little lines that we draw between us and them. We had gotten into a discussion at the coffee hour about attending church, about the Roman Catholic Church being open for sacraments and in-church services. And we quickly began to speak somewhat disparagingly about the Catholic Church and their need to come every Sunday, rain or shine, COVID or not. And I threw in that the Rotary Club requires attendance every week. And that opened it up to a discussion of a lot of civic groups. We talked with amusement about the Shriners and the little cars. And we talked with some amusement and perhaps some condescension about other civic groups. And that's about how far it went. But I am realizing now that we do harm. When we draw these lines between us and others, we do a lot of harm. I think that those kind of conversations are kind of like a gateway drug to something that does lead us to the sin of restricting ourselves from others who are different from us. Kind of a gateway drug. For you and for me, the importance of praying to avoid that sort of thing is that we've talked about this, we all have a goal now of reconciliation. We have a goal of training ourselves to reach out across lines, to know and to hear and to listen to people that are different from us. I know that you also have a goal of growing this church. How can you achieve that if visitors see us as a closed group? How can we achieve the goal of reconciliation with others that are different from us if our hearts are not open? How can we begin to train our hearts? That's your homework assignment. How can we begin to train our hearts? I would suggest that you begin by considering the little boy Samuel, whose innocence you heard about this morning. It's a touching story. No one says how old Samuel was. He's referred to as a boy, but I know that he was given over to Eli as an apprentice at a very young age, maybe 3 or 4. And I picture him as being maybe about 10 years old in this story. And I'm so touched and moved by the innocence with which he hears. Here I am, for you called me. And speak, for your servant is listening. There is no judgment in his heart. Consider the little boy Samuel. And then strive for the heart of Nathaniel, who it turns out was willing to be surprised, who responded to the invitation, come and see. He was willing to be surprised, even to come and see someone from a place he scorned. And then what we know is that he comes to see greater things than he ever imagined. Amen.